Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, December 5th. Thanks for being here. I think first up on our agenda, we have a presentation from Nick Glue with Medco. Well, he's got some guests with him.
Good afternoon, City Council. Nick Glue, President of Marion Economic Development Corporation. We just wanted to take a few minutes here. Obviously, you see and hear from myself regularly, but wanted to just give you a little bit different perspective on some of the partners and other organizations that we work with throughout kind of the greater region and how that relates to some of the activities that we work to support as an economic development organization. So I just want to start with kind of the simplest statement, but is something that we focus on a lot. If you've ever been to one of our board meetings, you hear this, you've heard me say this, that our organization exists to create an exceptional business environment for companies to compete and thrive. Everything we do is focused on helping to support and drive and grow that exceptional business environment where our companies operate. But we don't do that alone, so today we wanted to talk about and highlight some of the partners that we work with in order to drive our reason for existence. And so obviously you're aware, and we talk quite regularly about how we work with and you see play out here in these council chambers, how we work with our city. You're very aware of the role and the things that our Chamber of Commerce do within our community. But some of the organizations that maybe we don't talk about all too often, the first one, because it's a relatively new organization, are some of them that you see there, the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City Corridor Development Group. And we'll introduce to you Jennifer Daly, who is the first leader of that entity representing our region. Doug Newman with the Economic Alliance is here. You've heard of that organization, and he's going to spend a few minutes talking about some ways that we work with that organization, and then maybe some ways that maybe Medco directly doesn't work with them, but that the City of Marion might consider working with them in the future in some capacities that they have. And then also through some projects that we work on, you often sometimes hear about organizations like the Iowa Economic Development Authority. We work with our schools, but we just want to focus on a couple of them today. So you've perhaps seen this document before. As we work with partners, as we invest resources, we're always very, very intentional to make sure that what we do isn't the exact same thing that another entity does. So we obviously work closest with our Chamber of Commerce, who we share a home with, who we partner with closely as we support these various roles within our community. But if you zoom in just to the core functions that we support, some of these areas that I highlighted, we actually do that together in some ways with a few of the partners that are here today. So without further ado, I think I'll begin by bringing up Doug Newman. Doug, if that's okay, with the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, and he's here to say hello and share a few remarks. So, Doug.
Nick, thank you, and Mayor and City Council, good afternoon. I appreciate having the time to be part of this presentation, and I'll be brief, but also sort of invite a conversation anytime that you want. The City of Marion has been a very long time partner with not only with the Economic Alliance, but with the organizations that predated the Economic Alliance, particularly Priority One, the Cedar Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce, and many of the things and the relationships that you had throughout all these years continue in our new form. We try to sort of abbreviate what we do. One of the challenges in presentations like this is that same with the Marion Chamber and the things that Nick does, we do this many things, and it gets to be a challenge to sort of just spend a couple of your minutes. But I'll just talk very briefly. We categorize this in really four core functions. We work on public policy, local, state, federal, business-oriented public policy issues. And we do that very much in conjunction with many people in the City of Marion. I know Nick and I work together on issues along those lines and talk a lot about his reliance on us for some public policy strength. We organize the Corridor Day at the Capitol. We, from time to time, will even organize trips to Washington, D.C. And work on legislation that's helpful to all of our communities. Business support is sort of the old chamber function, locally owned, family owned, small businesses, and a lot of the issues that are unique to those. Significantly, if I just had to point out a couple of things, we continue to jointly run the ambassador program with the Marion Chamber of Commerce. So when we've got a ribbon cutting, when we've got a groundbreaking, when there is something to celebrate about business success, that is a regional or a metro area joint program, and ambassadors that are coming to cut a ribbon at a Marion business would also cut a ribbon at a Cedar Rapids business. It gives a great efficiency, I think, a great effectiveness to the way that we do business, and we've had a great relationship with Jill Ackerman and the chamber staff as well. So within community development, we talk a lot about the vibrancy and growth of core business districts. And one of the big things that we've worked to try to educate people on over the years, in the 6 years since we started the Economic Alliance, is that doesn't solely mean downtown Cedar Rapids. Part of our disadvantage has maybe been that I was a downtown Cedar Rapids guy, and I think people assume that that core function continues to just be that. But we talk again and again about Czech and Newbo, Kingston Village, the Med Quarter, Uptown Marion, the eventually developing town square area of Hiawatha. All of those are unique central core business districts that are really a core part of our function. We've added Brooke Prouty to our Community Development Innovation Council, and we've really helped convene and facilitate discussions among all of those core districts, Main Street directors, district directors, that have very common issues when you think about signage and wayfinding, facade improvement grants, other grant funding that can come to those core districts. So a lot of strength, I think, in that relationship right now. And then finally on economic development, kind of the core business attraction, workforce things. I'm going to save most of that for Jennifer, who's coming up right after me. But we do a lot of work with Medco through corridor development and through the Economic Alliance. And that, I've had a really great meeting with Lon and with Nick here just recently to talk about the way that things have changed over the years. I give Nick a lot of credit for doing things in a more professional and sophisticated way than maybe were done at one point, which means in some ways when it comes to economic development, you rely less on us than you maybe used to. Nick has the ability to drive business expansion projects, to have some of those relationships with the state. And he does a lot of that stuff in partnership, and I think we have a great relationship and certainly rely on each other. But I want to just, in a very quick way today, talk about all of the value that we can and continue to provide. I think as you continue your core district development, and this is a discussion that Lon and I have just started to have, but when you think about core development and some of the issues that may face you with parking problems, parking congestion, density of development, a lot of those issues, I think we have some expertise within those core functions to continue to help you and to continue to have a great relationship. So there's always more to say. I'm going to cut it off there and introduce you to and let Jennifer Daly come to the podium and really talk about the newest thing, this regional effort that we have around business attraction and workforce development, and the partnerships that we brought together to really try to energize those efforts in a way really unprecedented in the regard to the resources that we're putting into these areas and the energy that we're putting into these areas. So, Jennifer?
It's so nice to have a short podium. Thank you. It's really
I
nice.
know how you feel.
It's really nice to be here in Marion and just to get introduced today to everybody. I've had nothing but incredible welcomes in the corridor since I came back in July. So I'm about 5 months into this role. For some of the folks, just a quick background, my family moved to the corridor when I was 15, and I went to high school here. I went to the University of Iowa, and then I'm the co-founder of the Iowa Children's Museum. So if you had a chance to bring a kiddo to the Children's Museum at the Coral Ridge Mall, that was a project that I worked on when I was in my 20s and was very passionate about. And then went to Southeast Iowa, to the Peoria area, and then just in July returned here. So I've spent about 20 years in economic and community development, and working in that realm in primarily Southeast Iowa and Greater Peoria. I'll tell you, it's really exciting to bring back the things that I've learned to what I consider my hometown here in the corridor. So 5 months in, it's not very long, but I want to share a little bit about our organization and what we're focused on and how we hope we can help Marion and Nick with all of the incredible things that are going on here. So right arrow. So we're going to see if we can get some slides up here. It was interesting getting to our name. So some of the folks have seen the branding in the past, right, with the creative corridor. And Iowa's Creative Corridor, and we're still kind of working on the branding moving forward, but we felt the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City names were kind of important to have if we were going to market the region in a big way, because making sure that we're helping people understand the place of our region is important. So that's why you see the name that way. A lot of discussion went into that, and we'll be building out a new regional branding strategy based on what we know people know about the assets that are here in our region. So some of you may know that the development of our organization was really a joint venture between the Iowa City Area Development Group and the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. And they came together and felt like there's some economic development functions that maybe could be done in a better and a bigger way if we work together as a 7-county area. And specifically, you can see here this mission statement, and I think what's important here to share is that our focus is business attraction and workforce development. So those are the two core functions that used to be done with the Economic Alliance and with ICAD separately, and now will be done through corridor development collectively. The other thing I want to point out is it says in partnership with our local and regional partners like Nick Glue. That's a really important part of our organization, is supporting our local economic development strategies. This just represents our 7-county area. It's the same platform as Kirkwood Community College and our Council of Governments, so that's really great that we have the same service area that we're working on. And this just represents that joint partnership. All of the funding for corridor development for our organization comes through the EA and ICAD. So if you're an investor in the Economic Alliance or in the Iowa City Area Development Group, you're an investor in corridor development. They pass along some of that funding to us for us to do what we do. So we do not do any private fundraising ourselves. Our board, this is the makeup of our board, and we have 3 people from the EA and 3 people from ICAD. So each of those organizations appoint 3 people to the collective board. And then you can see we have a few other folks that are ex officio members of the board, but it's a fairly small group and very, very focused on those specific goals. And then also what's really important and what we established when I started 5 months ago is a technical team, because the board is a policy board and they're great at supporting direction, but we have a whole layer of folks that are on the technical level that are economic development, doing economic development at the ground level, and need to be heavily involved in the development of our strategies and the implementation collectively. And you can see I highlighted Nick because we're really excited that he's a part of this group. And this group meets monthly with our team and has really helped us craft our strategies and will be a key part of implementing what we do. And then our team. So when I started, it was me and then Delane Williamson, who is on the far right, who's been doing workforce development with ICAD for about 10 years. So we knew we had me and we knew we had Delane, and we've built out some of the other members of our team. I know folks here are probably pretty familiar with Brian Crow. Brian was with the Economic Alliance and agreed to move over to corridor development to lead business attraction for us. So we're really excited about that. And then Tom Banta, who's right next to Brian, is doing business attraction, or was, for the Iowa City Area Development Group. And 75% of his time is going to remain with ICAD doing community development work, but 25% of his time will be on our team doing business attraction. And then Kate Moreland, who's the black and white photo, is also with ICAD, but 40% of her time will be with us leading talent development, so career development with children in our schools across the region. I wanted to just reflect for a minute that we are a part of a bigger regional vision that some of you may have been involved with the development of, and it's still kind of, there's still some final steps to completing the strategy, but the regional vision is made up of three main components that you see here, and I kind of wanted to show how we fit into that structure. So there's three pieces of business development, three of workforce, and then we have our community development pieces that were called out in that plan that was developed with the leadership of quite a few people throughout the region. Our focus is the business attraction piece under business development, and then the two pieces in workforce development we're going to start with. But then our goal is to also bring on the unemployment, underemployment and unemployed component as well, as soon as we have the resources to take that piece on in addition to the first three. And so I promise I'm just going to say a few quick things about our strategy. Just as Doug pointed out, I could spend your entire meeting sharing details, and I won't because I know you have a lot of other things to do, but I did want to just touch a little bit on our strategy. So business attraction, obviously what we want to do is we want to create more opportunities to drive more business development for the 7-county area. And so we have planned out a very aggressive marketing strategy that will begin next year, which is going to include 20 marketing and targeted sales trips in 2018, which is a lot of marketing and sales trips that'll be all over the country and several outside the country in our cluster and our targeted clusters to develop new leads and opportunities for us here. We'll be launching a new regional branding campaign, and our goal is really a 25% increase in successful attraction projects based on the baseline over the past 6 years. Is we want to increase that performance by at least 25% over the next 3 years. And also attract a unicorn. So that's another part of our metrics is we would really like to land a major unicorn project for a region, which is that rare project like a Toyota that we might have spoken about just recently. We want to land one of those bigger employers with a higher capacity in terms of their capital investment and job creation for the region. So that's our goal for over the next 3 years. And then in the talent attraction, retention, and development side, there's a couple of things I want to share. Our goal is to have more qualified applicants for our companies, an increase in the employee retention rates, and an increase in students pursuing our critical careers in the region. And 4 key strategies that you're going to see develop through corridor development and all of our partners in the region. The first is a talent forecast, which will be a collection of detailed data from our employers to help us understand what those critical careers are and who they intend to hire. A communication strategy around those critical careers to educators and our counselors and our parents and our students. The third icon there is the Pathways program. We're going to be working to develop a region-wide Pathways program in our schools to help guide career development in our schools for our students in alignment with the needs of our employers. And then finally, the fourth piece is a great culture. We need to retain people by having companies that have great places to work. So we'll be working hand in hand with our employers to help them continue to have incredible cultures in their places of work that will retain and attract talented people. So all 4 of those are really, really big things. And at a point down the road, I'd love to come back and maybe focus on maybe one of those pieces to share a little bit more in detail, or I'd be happy to schedule time to have a cup of coffee anytime and discuss any of these pieces in further detail with anyone here. So with that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jennifer or Doug or
I have a question for you. I noticed on your lineup there, was there any one of you that go in and for the state government representation? Because a lot of times to attract like Toyota or something big, it takes state involvement in that. Is there anything that you have going on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working closely with the Economic Development organization for the state of Iowa. I always want to call it the Iowa Department of Economic Development because that's what it was called before. I think they've changed their name a little bit, but we're working closely with their team, and we did on the Toyota project, of course, where we got down to the final 11 in their lineup for that project, and. So they're an important part of our team, and certainly anytime we have a major project, we look thoroughly to see if we can find any connection to the project, whether it's a legislator, whether it's one of our CEOs in our companies, whoever it is that can help us get an edge and a relationship. We certainly leverage that.
Okay. I'm sure Nick would have told you that, they could have put the plant in Marion.
Absolutely. We just want it for the corridor. Where it lands is up to Nick and our local economic developers to put their best foot forward, and we just want to have more opportunities for Nick and everyone here.
I'm teasing you. I bet he thought about it, though.
Any other
Absolutely.
questions?
That actually is a good segue, though, Joe. I mean, one of the things that we're really thrilled about is this group marketing our region. It helps us. We work to understand what projects best fit our community, so that when, as a region, as they're marketing our region, they provide opportunities for our region to compete for projects. We're immediately ready to step to the table to know which ones best fit us.
Right.
Unfortunately, Toyota would not have been a good fit for Marion.
Right.
And Toyota was a good fit for other areas within the corridor. But I think different than any other time that I've been involved in this, I think everyone would agree as a region, we finally kind of got this whole how do we market the region thing figured out structurally. There's strategy still being developed, but we're pleased to have both these people here to support us
reaching
within
higher,
our
Mayor?
community. We'll say what, Joe?
I said that's reaching higher.
There you go. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
the whole region is reaching higher together, so that's the
right.
important part. And I want to thank Doug and Jennifer for coming here to share the information with us. I think it's important for us to understand what's going on regionally and to remind us that we're part of a bigger region. I know we get focused on what's going on here, but we are part of a bigger region that's really interdependent. And the success of one community is the success of all the communities, and we all need to succeed together. And it's really great and refreshing to see this cooperation and collaboration across the region. I think it's going to lead to some great results. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for coming. You can come back anytime and update us. So, all right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nick.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. I'm
Welcome.
Matthew May. Thank you. I'm the Communications Coordinator for the Linn-Mar Community School District. Dropped my note. I'd like to thank you for providing us with the opportunity to speak to you today. It's a privilege to represent the 2017 Marion Leadership in Action class. With me today as part of that class are Chief McHale, Amanda Prouty, and also Katie Lukin. But again, it's a privilege to not only represent the 2017 Marion in Leadership Action class, but alumni from previous classes as well. As you're aware, in the past, an initiative was launched by the Marion Leadership in Action class to celebrate the holidays with a winter light and display project. The goal was to add festive decorations in the community. This included the purchase of banners and light displays for light poles throughout the city. Our goal is to continue the vision of our previous classes with a new campaign that will enable us to provide future additions to these displays to be celebrated by and throughout the community. It is my privilege today to announce that the fundraising campaign raised by last year's class raised a total of $4,108.78. Today, I'd like to respectfully ask you to consider matching those funds raised by last year's Marion Leadership in Action class. By doing so, you will greatly contribute to our vision of implementing a winter beautification project plan that will be celebrated by the community for many years to come. Soon you'll be receiving a letter and a pledge outlining our new initiative for this season and its goals. I thank you for your time, your consideration, and your support.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Well, I know that I'm very supportive of the holiday lights. All the staff knows because I'm always pushing for more holiday decorations and lights. But so thank you for taking on that project.
Thank you.
Yep.
At this time, I'd like to introduce again Brooke and Kara Briggs Farmer.
Welcome.
Thank you. I've got my hat on today, not from Main Street, but from the Chamber and from Marion Leadership in Action. We decided this year that we wanted, with Mayor Nick's guidance, that we wanted to do something with the funds raised last year that would show our support for the community. How lighting works within the districts, when you purchase it, if you purchase it in the spring, it's at a deep discount up to 40% off. So being good stewards of the donations that we received in the past, we wanted to purchase them in the spring, but we also wanted to show that we're using the money that was donated last year and to also gain more momentum behind the project. So this year, with the Chamber's approval and with Marion Leadership and Action's approval, we decided to create a Christmas tree that was created by a local artist. So this isn't something that we're looking for discounts in the spring. This is money that we're putting towards a local artist, Kara, and she's here to present her project that she's created, and we would like the council's support for putting it up within the district.
Did everyone get photos in their packets? Yes, no? Yes, no. This one, it's a picture of a stainless steel tree on sawhorses in my shop. No? Here.
There you go.
One more. So in my meeting with Brooke and Jill, we were sort of looking through some catalogs of some really gorgeous, commercially produced, large-scale Christmas trees, and all their price tags started at about the equivalent of a new car. And that's not a very friendly budget number. So I was talking with Jill and Brooke about what can we do that's going to be unique, that's going to last a long time and not break the bank. So we sort of took this design of like an open structure stainless steel sphere on an armature that bolts to a center post. And this is the largest one, starts at about 2 feet off the ground, and they gradually get smaller, going up to about 16'4" tall. It all breaks down so it can be stored. Stainless doesn't rust. The carbon steel center structure is treated with a nice Rust-Oleum hammered finish, which will require minimal maintenance. My idea for lighting, rather than trying to string hundreds of feet of twinkle lights through this thing, is since it is the stainless is shiny, I think we can get a really nice dramatic lighting effect with just 4 small pin spots doing some dramatic downlighting from the top. It's really hard to vandalize, really easy to maintain, and pretty cheap to purchase. So, did I miss anything?
It's laying down in this.
Yeah,
photo.
in that photo, it's. I couldn't. My shop
photo.
is only 11 feet tall, and the tree is 16'4", and I couldn't. So it's on its side. I had to stand on a table to try to get far enough away from it to get a photo of it. I still didn't get a very good photo. If anyone wants to come see it, it's over in my shop, the orange building behind Cast of Thousands.
Okay. Is the goal to have this ready for this holiday season? Or?
It's ready to go. I just
Oh,
need somebody with a hammer drill to stick it in the ground.
Oh, interesting. Questions?
Kim.
Yes,
Where
Kim.
is it going to be placed?
The conversation that we were having was potentially the former bus stop across from the park, where there used to be a covered bus stop there, and now there's nothing. I think it would be a nice spot for it. We've got the space. It would be a nice balance to the park.
Structurally, it would also support it.
So this is being purchased by the Chamber of Commerce. So what decision is needed from the city?
Just your support in putting it up.
Oh, okay.
And then also asking to help install it and store it.
Okay. So
The big one,
Is this-
storing it.
is this all in Mike's department, or who's? Or Ryan? Okay, Ryan and Mike. Okay.
I have another question.
Yes.
Okay, so the banners and the lights, that's what the Leadership in Action's been doing. Do you have like a goal, what you want to accomplish in a few years? How many banners and how many lights? Do you want to add more to it, or what's going to happen? Yeah.
Yeah, so in previous years, the class has just picked one piece of lighting to purchase, which has worked well so far, but we need a more comprehensive plan for future classes to follow. So that's what our class is doing this year, is we're putting together a plan that looks at what do the next 5, 10, 15 years look like that can be modified per development within the district or the core areas within our community that we want to place lights, such as our gateways or out at Lau Park, that sort of thing.
Okay. Great. So do we need like a vote on Thursday, or how do we do this? Or
No,
No.
this is something that would be normally done through the hold harmless process, so there
Okay.
wouldn't be council action required. But we will need to take a look at it with the department's input. For example, I'm not sure, what the availability of power is in that area. There's just a few things that we'll have to look through to make sure that we put it in an appropriate location.
We'll need a vote for the match for last year's.
Oh, that's a different
That's
issue
separate.
from,
Okay.
Yep.
right, from the
Yep.
tree itself, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for doing that.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing it.
This year? Or this year yet?
Mhm.
Oh, good.
Okay, next on the agenda is a presentation
Your Honor,
regarding, I'm sorry?
that's been moved to Thursday, and then the
Okay.
next one has actually been moved to a future meeting. So I've
So-
significantly shortened the meeting for you.
So, all right, the two remaining presentations then are off the agenda?
Yeah, the first one will be on Thursday.
Okay.
The second one will be at a future meeting.
You should note for the record that might be the first time engineering has shortened a meeting.
I'll make up for it today.
Yeah.
Beth can note that. Okay, well, thank you. Then I guess moving on to public services.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll start with item number 1. This is approving our annual snow removal program. Each year, we bring to the council the programs and policies to be approved by resolution. That includes designating all snow routes and secondary roadways. Not a lot of changes from last year. There are some changes. I'll go over them with you. The board and the staff are recommending adding the new section of Tower Terrace Road in Winslow. This is east of 10th Street, connects to existing Winslow Road. We define that as a snow route, or at least recommending that. Additionally, we added some what we call secondary roads. These are treated as snow routes, but are not programmed within the routes themselves. One of them is Irish Drive, north of Tower Terrace. That's starting to pick up in traffic, and collectors talking with Mike. Be a good plan for us to go up there, turn around in the park, and then come back down. And then additionally, Armar Drive off of 100, since that's open now. We're going to amend our 28E with the City of Cedar Rapids. Go ahead and pick that up. We tend to be there a little bit quicker than they are, and then also pick up some other secondaries in that area. So, any other questions in regards to the program this year?
Questions?
You haven't changed the category for depth of snow when you plow or anything like that, have you?
No, all the programming stays the same. Last year, we got a little bit more aggressive. We used to have a 4-inch policy going to residentials. We never abided by that. If we got an inch or two of snow, we're in there.
Yeah.
So we bumped it down to 2 inches last year, and so we're going to recommend sticking with that.
Okay,
So
thanks.
Yep.
Well, you do a good job with that. Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. Then item number 2, real quick. This is something not so new. We're recommending approval of a 28-day agreement with Mount Mercy University. We do have existing agreements with colleges and universities, but they're looking to us to supply them with winter de-icers, rock salt, so to speak. We do aggregate a lot of that at the city. We supply it to a number of neighboring communities and agencies. This one's unique is that we're going to utilize some of their infrastructure as well for some projects we got coming up. We have a big building. We're going to take advantage of that. And so we're going to recommend approval of this as well. So.
Okay, questions? Yes, ma'am.
Not about this, but about the first one. Paul, wasn't it you that said you got a phone call about Kim?
Kim and I both did.
Yeah, about snowplows on trucks already. And the fire chief enabled us to understand that they're out there practicing.
The plows go on the trucks in about October. We have them on there then because we're ready to go. We've had snowfall as early as second week of October before in Iowa.
But they've been practicing how to get around parked cars and this type of thing, which I think is excellent.
Well, last week we had we do that every year, and so every year we set up coursework for the employees to go through. It's quite a sight. You kind of want to stay back a little bit. We do that every year. They get aggressive with it. It is competitive.
Use your car.
Use their cars.
Yeah, no, they hook up to the snowplows and they go through a course.
I mean to go around them.
Go around your car. You put yours in there.
I don't think they'd go around it.
Okay.
Okay.
So are you still doing what's like Springville and those?
Yeah.
This is in addition to all of
This
that?
is in addition to that. We do support work for Hiawatha, Robbins, Springville, Bertram, Mount Vernon, Anamosa. There's quite a list there.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't take any time or resources from us. We just steer them in the right direction, offer, they buy the rock salt from us.
They
get
come
a
and
little bit
pick it
cheaper.
up. We don't have to deliver it, right?
Sometimes we do, but they have to pay for that. We have those fees programmed already.
Okay.
So, some cities just don't have the capabilities to do that. So.
All right.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Next is police. See, there's a couple items.
I'd like to say, Mayor, that for 2 years I asked for a sergeant of arms, but this is a little overwhelming.
Right? I know. Well, careful what you wish for.
I know. I know.
Mayor, council, it's an honor to be here tonight. And this is the 1-year anniversary of me gaining employment with the city of Marion, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank Lon, thank everybody at the table to my left, and everybody on the council, Mayor, for making me feel so welcome here and supporting me in my first year. I've loved it. I also want to say thank you to the people at the back of the room. They've all welcomed me here into their police family. I love being here. It's very rewarding. A lot of challenges for us as a department moving forward to protect this community. But I can tell you from myself and everybody in this room, we love doing it. And we just really love being a part of Marion reaching higher too. So thank you so much from me. During my first year, though, and I sent out an email to council and Lon and the mayor this last week based on a request from Amber on our accomplishments so we can begin to prepare for the next year. A lot's been going on in my first year, just looking at the strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats to our department and our community and how we're going to grow. And tonight's an opportunity for me to introduce a good friend of mine, but he's also a very well-respected researcher in the United States, to give us our first piece of a puzzle that we're trying to build here. And that puzzle is a 5-year plan, a 5-year strategic plan on how to grow the Marion Police Department in concert with everything that we talk about at these council meetings, hotels, tourism, baseball fields, traffic. All of that is going to come with a cost. and that cost is police protection for us to keep this community safe. As each of you are aware, 38% of the general fund goes to fund the police department every single year, and when you add that with fires, 21.2%, that's 55.3% of your general fund. When you begin to increase public safety resources and capacity, you really impact the general fund. So it's incumbent upon me to present to Lon so he can make good decisions for the city on behalf of public safety. And that's why one of the first people that I reached out to was Dr. Nick Corsaro from the University of Cincinnati. He is here with us tonight. He is the director of the Institute of Crime Sciences at the University of Cincinnati. He is also the former director of the research at the Police Foundation in Washington, D.C. He has worked with departments across the United States to assess evidence-based crime prevention strategies, and he does staffing analysis for agencies across the United States. So I'm going to introduce Nick at this time to come up to the podium. And I just want to be clear, this is just an educational session for council and incoming council, for Lon, and for members of my police department. So in the coming years, I can make recommendations to Lon that are based on data and based on the growth coupled with keeping Marion safe. So, thank you. Thank you.
I have a presentation on this with a locked password. Is there a password for this? Access.
Password.
James left. Did he leave?
Yes. 4 or 5. Still be here.
Here's all. I can ad-lib this if I need to, and I'd be happy to in a minute or so. I'll start with an introduction about myself, sort of the initial slides, and then if I'm able to get this up, I'll skim through it quickly. My research with police departments across the country is really focused on evidence-based police practices. The one recurring theme that we know is if you put intensive police patrols in high crime areas, you can reduce crime at least while the patrols are there, but then you pull them out, things tend to go back to the way they were. Staffing is not something that we do as a foundation for the types of work that we do. We typically focus on practices, policies, procedures for equity, efficiency, and effectiveness, more so in effectiveness. But as an example, my first sort of foray into staffing was at Michigan State, where they'd been doing this for quite a long time. And we were hired by the George Kaiser Family Foundation in Tulsa to do an assessment on the police department. And the first thing that we looked at on that police department was what was their staffing needs relative to what they were expected to do. And so that was a critical component. Since that study, I've done probably 8 or 9 more staffing studies. And what I have typically found is that there are some agencies that are severely understaffed, like the city of Tulsa was. So we worked with city council, and they got a permanent tax increase where they hired 150 additional patrol officers. That's a unique case. Most of the agencies I work with are either moderately understaffed, possibly staffed sufficiently, but maybe not allocated properly. And in some cases, an unnamed university in the Midwest pays my bills, is severely overstaffed for their police department. When we did their staffing analysis, I said, I don't know what these patrol officers are doing all day, which was not well received, and so we were sort of done at that point. But the important point to this is we don't do staffing for hire. What we want to do is to see distribution of need versus response. And so one of the things that we looked at was the evidence-based practices on staffing. And there's a variety of sources for it. The International City Management Association, the ICMA, proposes a series of models, and the U.S. COPS Office proposes a series of models. And those models are really based on 3 components. One is sort of a 60% allocation rule. that a police department should at least have 60% of its agency devoted to patrol resources. And the reason being is because patrol does the lion's share of the work. What we found in a couple of agencies that were a little bit overstaffed or insufficiently staffed is they'll sort of graduate up and they'll have a lot of mid-level management, but they don't have people out on the street doing the jobs that need to be done. So some of our recommendations in the past was, you've got too much mid-level management, you need to get people back on the streets. We did not find that here, but that's something that we keep in mind as well. In addition to that, and this is coming up, so I'll be able to give you a visualization as to what I'm talking through. All right, in addition to that, in addition to the 60% allocation rule, we also have to take into account resource allocation time the ICMA and the U.S. COPS Office differ. We actually give a more conservative estimate than both of them that patrol should not spend any more than 60% of their time doing citizen-generated calls for service. That responding to police allocation of resources, court time, training days, all these sort of things that matter, that they shouldn't spend more than 60% of their time for citizen-generated calls for service. Now, if we go by that model, then I would make a fortune going across the country telling every police department that you're understaffed, because it's not feasible. So COPS Office went to 65%. We actually, in this report, went to 67%. That's sort of pushing it to a reasonable expectation of work distribution without, thank you very much, by the way, for doing this, without being in a position where they'll be too far behind. So on that 60% rule, we actually moved to 67%. And then there's the shift relief factor. And I think the way that we all sort of think about this is if we own a coffee shop and we have 2 people as clerks, we need a third person. We may not need a third person full time, but somebody's going to have a day off, somebody's going to have a sick day, somebody's going to have something come up, and so we need someone else to fill in that spot. And if you grow big enough, if you have enough allocation of that, you have to have a shift relief factor for compensatory time, which we're going to talk about a little bit, benefit time, sick days, days off that officers have in the contract, and rightly so because of the workload that they have going to them. So we've got all of these sort of components that we're taking into account. Now, the one thing that everybody could do is a simple number of police officers to the citizen ratio. But that is a big deceiving number, and I bet you can all sort of see why that would be the case. Cities that are very, very wealthy can afford more. Cities that are very, very poor and have less population can afford less. Just because they have less or more doesn't mean that they need more or less. Sometimes it's inverse relative to what needs to be done. So I'm never a big fan of the citizen to patrol officer ratio. For me, the greatest impact on this is what are the citizens asking of a police department to do? So citizen-generated calls for service. And again, we want to keep this at around 67% of patrol allocation time. Now, most of the time, that's calibrated with citizen population. The city of Marion has grown quite a lot in your population from 2000 to 2016, from 26,000 to 38,000. But your citizen-generated calls for service have not really increased relative to that proportion. And I've done ride-alongs in the city, and I have an expectation and a guesstimation as to why that is. You have a lot of new, nice development on the north side. A lot of people have moved here, and people in a lot of these areas are not necessarily calling on citizen-generated calls for service. They're not calling on the police for need. And that's often the case. It's the Pareto principle. A small place or a small proportion of people draw upon the majority of resources. It's always been true, and it typically is true today. So just because there's been this population increase doesn't mean that we have to think about growing the police department relative to that, but I think we do need to look at it from an analysis standpoint of what are the patrol officers doing relative to their expectation based on what citizens need. Now, we looked at the data for several years, and consistent with a lot of mid-sized cities, you'll see that traffic-related crashes or traffic-related incidents are the majority of citizen-generated calls for service requests, as well as public service checks such as wellness checks, misdemeanor crimes, medical responses, property crimes, complaints, and you can sort of see the distribution. The other distribution is really, really widespread. Some of it was surprising, which I'll talk about in my conclusions, some of these other offenses. But I think the one recurring theme that we see out of the patrol division here in the city of Marion is they're very generalist. They have to deal with a variety of different issues, traffic issues, misdemeanors, public service checks, then an offense, prowling, which occurs at some odd times of the night, and so forth. So this is a very unique diagram that they're dealing with. Call density occurs most generally in this report that I've shared with you in peak times, unsurprising to you, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. So it would be nice if all the patrol allocation resources could be devoted to those times because they get hit the most, but you can't really allocate everybody into those times because you've got these sort of work shift schedules. And so what has been done to this point has been very reasonable. I don't think the police department is taking the numbers that they've had and shift it badly. I think they've done a very good job, and I'll show sort of the need based on the distribution. And the other thing that we care about for this density distribution is priority one calls. You have an emergency call, something that needs to take priority now where police need to get there. The response times are always better, and they were in the city of Marion PD, and those citizen-generated calls for service for priority one calls relative to all the other ones. But even of that time, in those peak times, that time goes down because they're backlogged, I think, from the distribution. And so we did it hour by hour, day by day, month by month, seasonal effects, and you see this trend occur over and over. So when I look at it, comparing to these national models, do we see sufficient staffing? I'm a little concerned in the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. shift, during that shift, of the amount of time taken. It takes 38 minutes to clear calls when the rest of the time it's 21 minutes. And I think the reason being is because you've got so many calls to so many people that they're really, really getting backlogged in that evening shift. And the evening shift is the one that comes up as a bit of a problem in this workload distribution. The other shifts are sufficiently staffed, minorly sufficiently staffed, but the evening shift is problematic. But if you look at the number of officers that we have in patrol relative to that distribution, if they rob Peter, they pay Paul because they don't have it to distribute across the board. So would you rather have 2 of the 3 shifts inadequately staffed or 2 of the 3 shifts adequately staffed with one slightly low? It's a tough, difficult position to be in, I think, regardless. And then, of course, the shift relief factor, taking into account those vacation time, off time, training days, looking at the actual number that the officers has available to them and what they've used in the last year. So accounting for these things, we make a recommendation that patrol would increase by about 10 at some point, not immediately. I think it would actually be a mistake to do that. I've met with some of the patrol officers here, and the one recurring theme is you have people who are sort of committed and really like it here. If you try to do hiring, should this suggestion carry any weight with city management and city council to do anything with it, don't hire too quickly. Don't wait too long, but don't hire too quickly because you want to impose the same standards that you've always had so you get the same type of devotion, the same type of commitment that you have. When you fill spots with bodies to do it quickly, you'll regret it. Every police department that's ever done it does. And then something about the student resource officer, the school resource officer, I call it school resource officer, is responsible for a wide range of schools, one of the most I've ever seen in school resource devotion, 750 students across 3 school districts. If 7,500. I meant to say that 7,500 students. It was 750 students in targeted grades that we cared about, that you're doing sort of the most intensity with. And that's that 6th, 7th, 8th grade. The DARE program is 750 kids. 750 kids in DARE. Yeah. So you get that 12, 13-year-old juvenile delinquency curve, not delinquency curve, but that's sort of the risk factor of kids, which is why we cared about that particular time. It's a lot of allocation to one resource officer. So in addition to the patrol level issues, I would also consider potentially something with school resource officer. So the night shift, we found that the current patrol had 8, and our recommendation was 8 based on that distributional analysis. It seems sufficiently staffed, the night shift. The day shift, current patrol is at 12. Our recommendation is 15. That's at a 67% allocation for citizen-generated calls for service and taking into account shift relief factors. And then the evening shift, there's 9. Our recommendation is 16 because there's much more density there. If you look at the average priority 1 average response time, we start to see that it almost doubles in the evening shift relative to the night shift. Night shifts are always tricky because nothing happens and then everything happens, but throughout the entire duration of average, you can get the best because there aren't people on the road and you can respond quickly. The day shift, it still is about right. The evening shift seems a little different relative to what national expectations would be. If this approach would recommend an additional 10 patrol officers, it would go from, say, 23 to 31 patrol officers, but there also needs to be a supervisory to officer ratio, a patrol officer ratio. So 2 additional patrol sergeants that would still count in the overall 10, but somewhere in there needs to be the mid-level management. The sergeant patrol ratio would stay very similar. The percent of patrol will go up to 69%. That's sort of pushing it, but that's more important, or that's somewhat less important than the distribution of time, which seems to really matter. The interesting part is if this recommendation holds true, we give an officer-citizen ratio of about 1.47, which I don't put a lot of weight in, but I do use it as a metric of, or how far off are we relative to everybody else. If we look at the cities in the state of Iowa, 25,000 to 50,000, about 1.35, this would put the Marion PD consistent with those other cities in this area, but less than the overall average, which the state of Iowa typically has less crime, so it's something that I wouldn't necessarily use the national average relative to. There are other factors that the city manager asked us to look at, and they were very, very thoughtful, and a couple of them are potential solutions and implications. There are implications to whatever decisions are made, but there are alternatives as well. The alternatives always come at a price, but it's always worth thinking, costs and benefits. The shift relief factor accounts for this compensatory overtime issue. This may not go over particularly well with my colleagues in the back, but the comp time here is a little high. 480 hours used to be sort of a national expectation model. That's contractual. I'd look at it because most police departments don't have 480 hours of time. They've gone to 240, 120. So basically this is what it boils down to with comp time. I work a day, rather than take my overtime pay, I get a day and a half of comp time that I bill out later. Well, what most people do is they work when they're young, paid less, for that time, and they bank it when they get older and they want to bank the time. So they can bank 2 months of comp time that the department has to not only pay for, that's one issue, and the officers have earned it because they put in that time, but if I'm thinking about it from a staffing allocation issue, I've got people who can take time off whenever they want with the comp time that they've earned. I don't know how to deal with that because I have to have people on the street to deal with the job. If you cut comp time down, or consider it to 240, 120, whatever it would be, sort of more consistent with national expectations. Now, the state of Iowa is a little bit different because a few of the urban agencies still keep this 480 comp time. So it's something that's sort of regionally used, but it's not been done before. David Bailey and Robert Warden did an analysis on this about 20 years ago, and they found that comp time is really costly for police departments, that it's much more preferable when somebody works overtime, just cut them a check for the overtime then and be done with it, not sort of have the comp time issue. Another alternative is the use of civilianization, so you don't just put more sworn personnel, but use civilianization. It's a little tricky because It's not a huge agency, so a lot of the civilianization will go to larger urban agencies where the officers are responding more to crimes than they are traffic issues. There are provinces in Canada where they bring specialized civilians to go in and do traffic reports so that sworn personnel aren't doing that. They're responding to other things. You have training for that, you have supervision for that, and then you sort of create a division within patrol where you get specialists rather than generalists. It's something to think through as an alternative. It's been done, hasn't been done a lot in the U.S., but it's worth considering. There are shift changes. The going from 8 to 10 or 10 to 12, a lot of agencies do it. It's a little bit tricky. The Police Foundation, where I was the research director of, got a $1 million grant to study this shift allocation, and they spent $2 million to do it. It's a great way to break the foundation. You get $1 million, spend 2. But the one finding they had, it's not going to be surprising. 12 hours may save money. It definitely saves overtime, but it comes at an incredible cost. The cost being officer decision-making, officer fatigue, officer wellness. So the 12-hour model has problems. It may have some efficiency. The 8 to 10 is debatable, and a lot of agencies that have gone to 8s to 10s, 4 10s to 5 8s, they shift back and forth. So somebody has 8s, they go to 10s. Somebody has 10s, they go 8s. There's really no perfect solution to it. The one model that people have done that is a reasonable approach is having a staggered middle tier where the 10s are over the middle shift so that you get an overlap during peak times, like 1 to 3, so the 10 hours is in that peak time, so you get a little bit of an overlap there. The only problem I see with that here is I've only seen that done in agencies that have 250 in that division, so they can put 120 and 110 and 100 in the other, versus having 8, 9, 10. It becomes a little bit trickier. It's interesting because I proposed this to the chiefs, and they said that they'd been sort of playing with this, and it was completely independent of me. They knew that this is a way of doing it, so they've been doing it. The important point to all of this is a well-resourced department. I'm very impressed with it. I'm impressed with the building. I'm impressed with the resources. I'm impressed with the patrol. I'm impressed with the supervision. I knew Joe McHale not as chief here, but as captain in Kansas City Police Department. He'd grown a national reputation for evidence-based practice. When he came here, he wanted evidence-based assessment of data. He didn't want it sugar-coated. He didn't want to approach that way. He just wanted to say, what can we do that's efficient and effective? And I appreciate the opportunity to come in, speak with you. These are recommendations. There are pros and cons to them. I'm happy to field any questions for this assessment or any other ideas that you may have, either now or any time. I have my contact information here, so I would be happy to take calls or emails.
Thank you for taking the time to come and present the findings.
Thank you.
Any questions? Anyone?
It'll take a while to digest it all.
Sure.
Very good.
I know you.
Joe has a question.
You talked about having 10 more people on the force. Is there a timetable that you would recommend for that?
3 years. I would not hire more than 3 per year.
Okay.
3 to 4 per year. Because the great thing about, from my assessment, the way agencies done this in the past, is you're going to get attrition through that. And you kind of want attrition through that. You want people, if they're not going to make it through the academy, you don't want them in the department causing you problems. So you're going to, if you get 5, 6 in the academy, you're only going to get 3 that graduate, typically. So I'd say if you do 3, 3, and 4 over the next 3 years, you'd be in standard shape. I didn't mention this, and I don't want to take any more time. Other people have to speak. You are a growing city. You're growing in your economic development. You're creating hotels. From the lens of a police department and from policing, hotels are unique. They are not without issues. Even the nicest ones have a lot of population density, a lot of residential turnover. There's typically property crimes there. And all hotels start the same. They don't all end the same. And if hotel development happens, they're not all going to make it. probably, statistically speaking, and to make it successfully. And if they don't, then they do daily rates, weekly rates. That creates issues. I've seen it everywhere that I've worked at, that when there is that type of residential instability and movement, police end up putting allocation there. So in addition to what you currently have, that's something to think about. Could happen, not in a negative, skeptical way, but in a potential way, statistically speaking, that they may end up having to spend more time there than they had in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Corsaro. Did you have a question?
Would you say that the prior reputation of the police department of being one of the toughest in the area has helped the position that it's in now?
I would say so. I would say so because there's a professionalism in that agency that people really take a lot of pride in. They work a lot of extra time, and they don't necessarily do it for the money. They really, really will devote themselves to it. So there's a culture.
Oh, don't tell them that.
But there is a culture.
I'll tell them
I have seen cultures that are really bad, which is I'm going to do my time and I'm going to go home. And policing, fire, public safety is not a 9-to-5 time frame job. It's whatever comes up. So I think the culture here has been very good.
Oh, it's okay with me.
Well, while we have so many of the department in the room, I think, I would like to say thank you for all you do. And you are a point of pride for our city. So,
Your Honor, I do have one thing. I know it's Civil Service Commission here, and if we were to try to hire 10 new policemen, we'd have to test every month because they'll test. They just tested, and the chief had a list of 10, and how many are hireable, chief? 3, 4?
Yeah.
It's getting much more difficult to hire police officers. And it was. We used to have 80 people test, and now they have 30. Is that somewhere near accurate? So it's a whole new ball game when it comes to hiring these police officers.
It is, and that's why it was incumbent upon me to have this presentation. And like I said, I would like to incorporate his recommendations into it at a minimum a 5-year plan. I think I don't want to get any more aggressive with that. And I'm working very well with the city manager. We have some things that we're putting in place that can put another gun on the street this year without having to hire a new officer. So there's different ways we're going to look at it. That's why opening comments. I don't want to get too aggressive with this because the way it impacts the general fund. I want to be smart with it. I want there to truly be the need. And as we continue to see the growth, we'll see more of how it's going to impact us. How are the ball fields going to impact us? How are the hotels going to impact us? How's traffic going to be affected at 13 and 151? All those things we have yet to see that will help us make decisions how to grow this department. But we do have to prepare now for that growth and at least have a vision and a plan to prepare for it fiscally and to prepare for it as a department and the leadership to know where we're going. If you said you can have 2 officers right now, let's be real, I get them in a year. And so that's just where we need to head with that. So
it's great to see that we're being smart about how we're doing things, and we're being methodical and deliberate and intentional about how we're doing things. So
I know I preach this a lot, but if you eat too much of the general fund up, you can't invest in your sidewalks, you can't invest in your communities. And it's the chicken and the egg. You have to invest in your community, and you can't deplete that general fund to a point where you can't do that as a council. I've seen it in my old organization. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Chief.
Is we're going to have Lieutenant Elam is in charge of my investigations bureau. He is going to present on the next item of business.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about a purchase of a Faro scanner. We currently have what's called a total station scanner. We use that for crime scene and for traffic accident reconstruction, regeneration. And I'll kind of give you a background of kind of how that's gone in the past. It started out with crime scene measurements, traffic measurements, with a reference point and a tape measure. And from there, it graduated to a total station, which is where you have a base station, you set it up, and you have a pole with a reflector on it. A laser beam is shot at that, It sends it back to the total station base, and that gives you a measurement of distance. But it's 1 point in 1 point of time. So if I was going to measure this room, if this room was a crime scene, which I hope it never becomes, but if this room was a crime scene, we'd establish 1 point of reference. We'd set this total station up there, and any point that we wanted to measure, we'd have to have somebody with that pole go to each one of those points that we wanted to measure, and from there we'd have to use those points to map it out. The thing to remember about a crime scene or an accident scene is that you only get one shot at that. You cannot recreate that scene later. If you forget something, if something's wrong, you can't go back and you don't get a second shot at it, okay? The point that we're at now is what we're looking at buying is called the Faro scanner to replace our total station. And what this scanner does is you set it up, and instead of shoot out one beam, 1 point of light, and have to have 2 people to run it, you can set it up. It's one person. It's got a laser. It's on a spinning mirror, and that laser shoots out millions of points. And what you can do is you can set that scanner up. We can put that scanner in different areas of the room. It would scan. It would send out that laser. It would send that laser back to the scanner, and it would record the distance of those points. And it's basically like what I kind of relate it as if you ever went to Chuck E. Cheese, and they had that thing that you sat in, and it did like the little sketch thing of you. That's kind of what it looks like. Okay, and what it does is it does a sketch of your accident scene, of your crime scene, or whatever. But the difference is that you put that into the computer, you can go back and you can measure precisely. If I scan this room and I wanted to measure the length of this desk up here, I could do that from that scan, and it would be precise to within a matter of a millimeter. Okay, so it's basically we may never get a second chance with that crime scene or that accident. But if we miss something, we have the ability to go back and probably recover that. The other thing is we could set that scanner up in different corners of the room. We could scan, and then we could take those scans and we could mesh them together. And we could develop with the software. We could basically do, you've seen 3D animations. We can basically do that. And we can do that for courtroom purposes and whatever. Okay. The other thing about the scanner is photography is it's pretty dependent on, it used to be even worse before we had digital cameras. When we were using film, there was times where we'd do a crime scene and then realize that something was wrong with the camera, somebody left the lens cap on or something, the pictures didn't turn out. You go to a fire scene, it's really dark because everything's burned, everything's charred, a lot of soot. The thing about the scanner is it doesn't require light. You can set it up in a dark room and you can have it scan and you'll still have that total scan. So we can do a fire scene and not have to rely on the pictures. The thing with this scanner is it can incorporate pictures into the scan as well. It's got the ability to take a picture and then it incorporates that picture into the scan. And the other thing that we can do with this, it's not only used for police departments or fire departments, it's also used by engineering companies. It has a lot of other purposes that it can be used for as well that we could also possibly exploit through the city. So what we're looking at is a total just under $67,000 for this scanner. That includes the purchase price of the scanner, the purchase price of the software, on-site training for 5 days. The company sends somebody out to our police department for 5 days, and we can have as many people as they can handle being trained on how to use the scanner, how to use the software, and how to get the most out of that. And it also comes with a 3-year maintenance and warranty agreement.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah. Given the fact that there are crashes out there and you can photograph the whole thing, this would help also on any issues that a person would have as far as collecting insurance, et cetera, right?
Let's say, for example, we have a fatality accident at Highway 13 and 151. For us to work that accident right now, we'd have to shut down that intersection, and we'd have to have multiple people out there, and we could have it shut down for several hours. With a scanner, we could send 1 to 2 people out there, and we could probably have it done in an hour or less. Shooting that, there's a lot of other factors taken into consideration, but I've talked to other departments. I talked to an accident investigator from Davenport PD, which uses the same scanner. And they cut down on the manpower that they used. They cut down on the amount of time that they had to shut down major intersections in their city because they're able to use the scanner and get all their measurements that they need. And then once they're done, they can go back and they can recreate it on the software.
Well, given the fact that everything the police department or the fire department has asked for, I have supported because I see, having been there, the importance and
Yeah, and like I said, before, when you go out with a tape measure, you go out with a scanner, you make one measurement, you get 1 point. There's a lot of potential for error there, especially if you're reading a tape measure. I know that from measure twice, cut once. I learned a long time ago that it's a good idea to do that because you cut too soon and then and it's the same thing with measuring for crime scenes or accidents. You get a wrong measurement somewhere in there, it can throw everything else off. So,
I did those.
with tape measure?
Accident, yeah.
Yep.
And I assume this is in the budget somewhere. It's a
Yes.
budgeted item.
Yep, we're budgeted at 67,500. We're just a little bit under budget, and
Always good.
We're replacing the total station. Like I said, we'll probably keep that total station as a backup in case something would happen that we would need to use it. But this Faro scanner system, Cedar Rapids purchased one last year. We're purchasing the same system, so we'd be able to kind of work with them and back them up that if their scanner was down, they could borrow ours. We could send people out with it. If ours went down, we could have them come out with theirs. So.
That's great.
How long has this technology been around with this? Is this like the first generation or second generation of this?
This has been around a long time. The problem before was it was cost prohibitive to us. As the technology's been around for a while, it's come down in price, and it's finally come down to a point where we're able to. I've looked at this for several years. Several years ago, we were looking at $100,000, and now we've come down to the point that it's manageable.
That's what I was curious, because I figured that, if it's really new technology, the price is going to be really high. So this has been around, and it's starting to come down to where it's affordable.
Yes, and it's to the point now where they've pretty well perfected it now. It's push a button, go. It's the unit's weatherproof. It's there's a lot of good qualities to it. So.
Other questions? Thank you.
Right.
Oh, we have a comment here or a question?
Yes, Your Honor. One of the things I just wanted to maybe have the council aware of as I'm listening to this presentation and considering it, in my daytime job, I also do a fair amount of criminal defense work, and I do represent a lot of defendants in felony criminal cases, even on up through Class A felony, which are very serious cases. And when you look at the length of the trials involved in those and the issues that are involved, particularly with the handling of evidence and the likelihood that those come back on appeal and have retrials, when you look at the cost of prosecuting a Class A or a Class B felony case, which this type of equipment would be it'd be invaluable for, particularly murder scenes, things of that nature, I would anticipate that this piece of equipment would probably actually pay for itself in pretty short order compared when you consider one, any appeals that it would head off that would otherwise come back on appeal and you'd have to retry a case, or two, not just I'm anticipating it may even cut down on the amount of officer time that would be required in court to testify when you have this handy piece of equipment that can recreate the crime scene for the jury to see. You're going to see this, in my mind, I'm seeing this thing probably paying for itself within a year or two of being able to use it and put it in front of a jury. So there's a price tag to it, but one of the intangibles is I think you'll actually see that it's actually an investment.
That's good input. Thank you so much.
One other thing that we're seeing along those lines is juries expect now, they see that on TV, that the 3D animations and that type of thing. They're to the point where they almost expect to see that now, and it's really difficult to do that with sketching out a diagram. So,
thank you. Moving on to planning.
Can I ask the chief one? Chief, the patrol car, is that SUVs that you're looking at?
Yes, sir. We're reducing the amount of number that we replace each year. We're moving to a standard, the SUV for the standard vehicle, more room, better. We can equip it better.
That's what I thought it was.
Yep, 3 SUVs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on anything that's not starred in the engineering calendar. And I think then the planning is next. Anything? We have 2 things starred there. Was there any questions on things that aren't starred? Okay. Hi, Dave.
The first item is a plat survey for property located west of Alburnett Road and south of Echo Hill Road. Integrity Custom Homes, Kent Bakken, he has began to purchase portions of the Zezer property, which extend from approximately this location all the way to C Avenue. This is his first phase for this development, about 20 acres approximately. The plat survey is just going to allow the transfer from the Zezer family to Integrity Custom Homes to begin its first phase of some larger lot single-family homes. As we continue west, we do get into Cedar Rapids, basically at that red line. That's the annexation line. So this is a small portion in Marion, but we'll have developments that do straddle, and that line will probably adjust some. We do have an agreement, so we'll have to get with the Cedar Rapids City Council to amend that line as the plat comes in, just to make the lots fit, so we don't have one lot half and half from jurisdiction. But those will probably be equal exchanges as we get there. If we're going to take 4 acres, they're going to try to pick up 4 acres, more or less on Marion's side. But so as this development begins, that's something both city councils will have to consider and hopefully make work so the development can occur in this area. I believe Tom did have this item starred. This will require some sewer extensions from the south, obviously up into this development. When those sewer extensions occur at the cost of the developer, this opens up a very large area for future development in Marion and both Cedar Rapids. This is in addition to the sewer discussion going on down to the south side there too. So as our development occurs, bringing that sewer water over, it's obviously going to allow Cedar Rapids to start developing portions of this property. And again, that's all important for continued school growth, school enrollment growth, but it also creates a lot of pressures on our own infrastructure, and we're going to have to start addressing those soon. Any questions?
Any questions for this?
92 lots.
Yeah, 92. Big area.
All right, the next one, I got to go into a little bit of history, I guess. It's a little confusing. When I finished the report, I kind of read it and wasn't quite sure what I said in it. It's got a very long history, but I do have to go into detail on it. I believe the applicant will be here on Thursday to plead his case. This is another plat survey. Again, this is a tool to allow the developer to create a parcel to transfer it to another owner, so then they can do something with it. So when you have a larger parcel and you only want to sell part of it, this is the tool to do that. Now, the owner currently, now let me go back to a little history. This is the Echo Hill Ridge subdivision. It was preliminary platted several years ago. The developer came in, and I'll zoom in here in a second, and developed the south portion here. It's in the packet, it might show up a little bit better, and did single-family homes. Then he came in and did a second phase in this location, and the water department has a well there. This is Echo Hill Elementary right across the street. So I'll zoom in so you can see that. Kind of hard to see the lots underneath all the lines. So he began this development and was consistent with how he was developing it. Now, at some point in time, again, he owned all this 80 acres, plus or minus. At some point in time, he sold this east 40 acres to another owner. What he did when he sold that 40 acres is he sold something that was not consistent with the plan for this entire 80 acres. And what I mean by that, and it's kind of hard to see, there's this dashed red line, and you got this line being a road, this line being a road. This dashed line where he sold split lots in half. So now, instead of a 120-foot deep lot, this person over here only has the ability to plat a 60-foot deep lot, which is Number one, it's completely unbuildable, doesn't meet subdivision regs, doesn't meet zoning regs, whole lot of problems with that. When these owners realized what had happened, they came to us and says, you need to help us. And it got into a position as you bought land that wasn't consistent, they sold land that wasn't consistent with what was approved. No one's going to do anything until the two parties come together and fix it. Now, for about 4 years, those owners have not been able to come together and fix the problem that they created with the illegal split and the purchase. And a few months ago, the owners of this 40 acres, plus or minus there, came in and they said, we'll fix our side by creating a parcel here, this green, that we will not develop until we can get this little sliver picked up to allow those lots to be built. Fix the gaps in the road. And then we'll just develop this yellow area that's away from that troublesome no man's land, I'm going to call it. Council supported that and approved this little plat of survey to create this area to develop in the future, and permitted him to begin this phase, which he has already begun putting streets in and everything, and that should be coming to the City Council this spring. Now, fast forwarding up to today, I know this is really confusing. The new owner, or the owner of the original parcel that sold some, this pink area, he wants to do a plat of survey to transfer some land to somebody else so they can develop it. He owns everything from Alburnett Road all the way to this dashed line. And there are SK Investments. They own everything. They want to create a parcel shown in pink so they can transfer it to somebody else. XYZ Corporation. But what happens now, if allowed, SK Investments will own a tiny little sliver of land, 50 feet deep, and they don't own the other side of it. So they've created a situation where there's a strip of land that cannot be developed, streets will never get built, and the problem continues. It's basically doing what they did prior. For whatever reason, they have submitted this plat of survey, and we have brought it forward as a request. Doing something rare again, we're recommending denial because it's not fixing the problem that they created 7 or 8 years ago, and it's leaving this strip of no man's land that's undevelopable unless it's tied to pieces over here. So honestly, I don't understand the reasoning behind the plat of survey, how they're proposing it, but we are recommending denial. I do understand that they will be here Thursday to plead their case or try to clear it up even more, but as I understand it, I don't see how this is fixing the problem. So we're going to recommend denial. That prohibits this developer from continuing with his next phase. We have said no development, period, in the pink area, even if it's just 10 lots up in this corner. We're worried if we let them begin developing, what's to say, well, let us go to here. Well, let us go to here. We've really got to draw a line on this developer until he fixes this mistake here, similar to how the property owner to the east has tried to correct it on their side. I know that's a lot of information. I hope the staff report is a little bit clear. It's a very confusing issue. There's been we've been dealing with this every single year, and they came back, I think, earlier this year, and asked council's permission to kind of do something up in here, and at that time, the council said no. It wasn't a resolution. I think it was just they came in and asked, submitted a letter, and the council just said, nope, we're not supportive of that yet. So then he's come back with this.
That was very helpful.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's a very confusing issue.
Very helpful. So right now, the pink area, S&K owns that?
S&K Investments owns the pink area.
Still owns that.
And this little sliver all the way down there.
They're trying to sell that right now and to another, and so.
I assume that's their intent.
Okay.
The whole thing or just a portion?
I'm sorry, Mary Lou?
The whole thing or just a portion?
My understanding, they're probably trying to sell the whole pink area. And then they retain that sliver on the west side or left side of that line.
So you want that reconciled before any approval goes through?
That's our recommendation, yes.
Okay.
Well, that's what held it up before, was till they got that sliver fixed down on the green and yellow. I mean,
Correct, correct.
We denied that, what, 5, 8 years ago or 6
Yeah.
years ago?
Yeah, and I want to make it clear, this green area it gives enough land for the developer to make it work when he can get this piece developed. I mean, at some point in time, it doesn't affect their ability to develop the rest of it, which we all want development to occur, but it leaves enough land for it to work. Now, this developer would come over here and say, okay, I'm going to do the same thing that these folks did and create an area kind of right in my pen there as a plat of survey. That's enough land to support that slip, if that makes sense. So they can't come right up to it and create undevelopable situations, and they didn't choose to do it that way. So this is the most convoluted plat I think I've ever had. I mean, just how it's transferred, and there's been some foreclosures or bankruptcies. It's really complicated, this piece. So.
Well, I think it would behoove us to deny it insofar as if we don't, it's going to pass it on to future years that it's going to snowball.
I think if you approve it, I think it'll only make the situation worse in the long run. I really believe that. And we'll be back here next year discussing it again.
One of the challenges with this development as it's occurring also is that it creates gaps in our network. So actually the green area there west of the yellow, we're going to end up with a gap in that street. And those gaps become relatively short when they get constructed in the future, and we end up with, I want to say, irregular profiles and so forth. We have potential for rough spots and so on. So we as engineering are not recommending it either.
I kind of point one more item. I'm sorry. Just because we allowed this development, the council allowed this development to happen, you'll notice I got an area of white here. These are about 7 or 8 lots here. They're all sized appropriately, but fire was, I think it came from fire, might have came from Tom, but this is Waveland Drive, I think is what it's called. Because there's a gap here, they didn't want to do a Waveland Drive here, when I say gap, I mean a ditch here, and then pick up Waveland Drive again. We wanted to keep, you're not going to get 2 Waveland Drives for response. If fire or public safety come into this side of the subdivision, they have to go all the way back out to Echo Hill and back up in. So if we take all the addresses off of Waveland until that little connection's made, that way they have a continuous street, continuous address. So when they do come in, they can still get over. So these lots are not going to be allowed to be platted until this is fixed. But see, that's just all part of building it's not the way you should develop. It's the only way we can fix it right now. All because people sold land without it, per the approved preliminary plat.
So is S&K Investments, is what you said, that owns the red now?
Yep.
Were they who sold everything to the east to whoever owns it now? Did they own, S&K own it all? And
no, it was Summerfield Investments, which is S&K, is related to S&K, I believe. Some of the same players. Summerfield Investments lost the property, lost it in foreclosure, bankruptcy, and S&K came along, and I think there's, again, some of the same people in that company that now own it. So
kind of. So the people who own it now are kind of the ones who.
The person that made the request for this plat survey was part of Summerfield Investments.
And that's who sold it originally incorrectly.
Correct.
So the original 40-acre piece there where that red dotted line is, that's basically what they ended up selling, that partial, without looking at the plat, the survey,
Correct.
to see how they actually platted it to begin with, and that's where we got into the problem.
They should have sold the east 40 acres plus.
Yes.
And legally described that sliver. They failed to do that.
And then who owns the east section?
Christine and Robert, I think, the McGills.
McGills.
I forget his name.
And that's who's developing the yellow?
That's who sold the yellow and the green to Integrity Custom Homes,
Got it.
Kent Bakken. They're not they're landowners, they're not developers.
As Joe points out, though, they're not getting along any better now than they were 4 years ago.
They just need, if they can do this if they can just come to agreement and flip-flop or trade some land and make it work, but they've got to do that. That's not anything we can force on them, other than just the ability to say you can't develop this.
Why wouldn't the white and yellow guy just move 60 feet? Just move.
Because it creates a bigger gap. I mean, he has to.
Just need to flip-flop to north and the
Oh
south.
yeah, I mean, they could easily say, we'll buy this 60 feet from you, and then you buy this 60 feet from us, or
Problem
whatever
solved.
it is, and it's almost fixed then. But they've got to do that, and the only teeth we have is to say, you can't develop this. And I mean, in McGill's or Integrity Custom Homes, Kent had to buy this green area, but he cannot develop it until he gets that white area. So he's sitting on, I'm going to say, 28, 30,000 an acre. He can't touch this, can't touch this until he can get it fixed. So Kent's sitting on a huge investment that he can't develop. So there's the incentive for him to keep trying to move this forward.
So P&Z.
It isn't our fault.
It really boils down to them just splitting property illegally. But again, they're going to be here and plead their case. But I mean, Tom and I just can't stress enough that this is it should be denied.
So did they go before P&Z as well, and P&Z turned them down?
It doesn't go to the plats and surveys. Just come right to City Council.
Yeah, okay.
Who's going to be here? SK Investment?
I imagine one of the Butchie.
Is that who SK Investments is?
Yeah, it's I think it's there's Bob Senior and there's Bob Junior. I'm sure Bob Junior will probably be here, or somebody else representing them.
So what will we see on the agenda then? Will be
It'll be I think they always put it in the pause. It'll be a motion approving, but we'll be seeking a denial of it. So
It all has to do with the pink area, not really the yellow area is just a side.
It's just a side story to help explain the story, I guess. But the area is really just the pink area is all you're approving.
On Thursday is dealing with the pink area.
Only dealing with the pink area, and that's because of the sliver issue.
Got it. Thank you.
The demilitarized zone, or what you want to call it. So.
Are we still denying this, or are we saying yes now?
Well, I think the recommendation is to deny. We haven't voted.
The resolutions,
so
I think the resolutions always come in the positive to approve, but I mean, we'll be looking for a denial of that resolution approving.
right. That's why I was asking you how it was going to come to us.
Yeah, it should be coming as an approval.
Yeah, so it'll come as a positive. But
And I'll make sure Tom, hopefully it's a brief one, but I'll make sure he reminds you on Thursday of how we'd like that done, or how we're recommending it be done.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Lon, who's filling in for you Thursday?
Thursday would be a combination of Dan and Amanda.
Oh, okay. In case there's any other
Amanda?
questions.
Amanda.
Demanda?
Demand.
That's only when she needs something from me.
Okay.
So Dan, you know the history of this too, right?
I've been involved with it over the years.
Okay.
All right.
Ready?
Sir, yes.
Yeah, the first item that's started under administration is a memorandum of agreement with Dr. Lenz for Uptown Dental. We have not received the signed copy of this, so we wouldn't act on it on Thursday, but I did want to at least take the opportunity to brief you on it. On his project, we have talked a bit about the brownfield conditions that they encountered on the site, and their initial application was for up to $85,000. That was before they found the storage tank on site that caused them to spend another $30,000, but they haven't asked for that. They've stuck with the original request. So to give you an idea of the types of things that helped to cover, or will help to cover, there was asbestos in the buildings on the site that had to be removed. They had to take out some contaminated soils and cap them. The water mains, and water services, they have to use a special water main, and they have to be gasketed, so they can't allow anything to infiltrate into the system. But the big ticket item was that they actually have to have a gas bypass system installed in their new building. So anything that comes out actually has to be vented out and go above the building, along with a continuous membrane underneath their building slabs. So given its history as a former filling station, that's not unusual to have to encounter things like that on those sites. But all told, those come up to $85,000. So we're proposing a series of rebates for the company that would be 60% up to 5 years with a maximum of $85,000, whichever comes first. With the projections that we have, the fifth-year rebate would actually end up being a partial rebate. Any questions on that?
Questions?
And the next two items are contracts with the Iowa Economic Development Authority. The companies that would be receiving assistance are Marion Process Solutions and Legacy Manufacturing, but these contracts do require a municipal sponsor in order for the businesses to be able to receive the funds. So Marion Process Solutions, the state is looking at providing $67,400 for that company, and then for Legacy Manufacturing, they're looking at providing $360,000, both of them out of the state's High Quality Jobs program.
So nothing from the city, we're just sponsoring the application.
We are the pass-through on it. Yep, the sponsor for the application.
Good. Both great projects.
Number 4 is a resolution that would authorize the mayor pro tem to exempt land donation of 4 acres at Waldo's Rock Park. This is a parcel that is to the east of the current Waldo's Rock Park. It's in the kind of toe slope area where any potential future east-west runway might be built, but it's also kind of on the downslope from the property that they've been developing for the new veterinarian clinic and kennel out there off of what is it? Is that the extension of Partners Avenue out past that area? And they'd like to donate that land to the city. This company is a client of the mayor, so of the mayor's firm, so we went ahead and authorized it for the mayor pro tem, and we're just waiting for the determination of value. We've asked our appraisal company to give us a value on the property. Once that's received, then we'll go ahead and accept the donation. But this way, the mayor pro tem would be able to sign the documents to accept the donation. They want to get it done before the end of the year for tax purposes, but since we don't have a particular schedule or know exactly when that appraisal is going to be done, this will let us get it buttoned up.
That is an area Mike has planted some wildflowers, and that's going to be kind of a meadow area, is that right? For the monarchs and the deer and the buffalo, and he's out the other place.
Yeah, we have about 4 acres out there that we've called out as part of the 1,000-acre prairie pollinator initiative, and that's a targeted area for next spring planting.
The last couple of items under administration are related. You've got the resolution approving the new organizational chart, and then number 7 is the resolution changing our pay schedule that we have set up for the non-bargaining positions to reflect new positions that would be coming online with the reorganization. As I've been through with the council before, essentially what we're looking to do is to modernize the city's organizational structure to really match where we are as a community. And Marion we've grown. We haven't really changed the organizational structure. There's only been one significant alteration to it really in the last 15 years. We're still using the same general structure that we've used since we were a city of 15,000 people. So as we've gone through and really looked at the internal departments that operate here out of City Hall, we tried to do a couple of things. One is to make sure that we are increasing capabilities, picking up positions and tasks and functions that we currently don't have the people to be able to do, but also accomplish a couple of other goals. One is to reduce the number of direct reports that are going directly to the city manager, but also with this phase of the plan, stay within the existing budget resources by repurposing some potential funds from some potential retirements and use ones that the City Council had already approved and programmed as part of this budget year that have not yet been filled. So we're trying to be mindful of the tax dollars. We talked about some potential ways that the organizational structure could be modified in the future, but as we really went through it and got into more detail about it, it really seemed like we weren't quite there yet. For example, we talked about having a city manager with 2 assistant positions and then having departments reporting to those 2 assistant positions. There will be a point that we reach where we're going to need to go to a structure that's like that, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I think that's maybe something that we hit when we hit 46, 47, 48,000 population rather than where we're sitting right now. And what this really allows us to do is to get more of those positions out there that have direct public contact, or the positions on the street that we're going to need for this next couple of years worth of growth. I've used the example before that just with a couple of the projects that are being planned right now, we could keep an additional building inspector busy full time on 4 or 5 projects that are going to be coming forward. And that's one of those areas where we don't want to make compromises, because if you miss something during a building inspection or a fire inspection, it pays negative dividends to you later on. So we need to make sure that we have that focus on that.
When do you foresee a new structure implemented?
Once the organizational chart is put in place, then we can't give you a specific timeline until we know how many people would actually sign on the dotted line for the enhanced retirement package that the council approved that would be offered after the first of the year. So I can talk in generalities, but until there's signatures, I can't get too specific about it. I would say it would probably be phased in over a period of a couple of years. There would be some immediate changes with some positions that are already included in the budget that would probably start occurring in March or April of next year, but we wouldn't have everything fully implemented until probably a year after that. So 2019 to have all of the changes in place.
So maybe it happened when I wasn't here, but has the chart been discussed with the?
There's another chart on.
Oh, I know that it's in the packet, and I have the chart, but I'm just saying, has it been discussed by the council? Has it been?
We talked about
at a
it
meeting?
last meeting.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we brought it forward last time but didn't put it out there as an action item, is we wanted to provide more time for the council to digest it and to have a chance to go through it. It's one of those things that I didn't think that council would appreciate getting thrown at you on a Friday and then asked to vote on it the following Thursday.
Okay.
It wasn't nearly as detailed as what you got in the packet.
Your Honor?
Well, that was my question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I really think that this should be, the approval of this new organizational chart should be tabled until next year when you have new people on board, because it's really not fair to saddle them with what we vote on, and 3 of us are not going to be there. So I only think it would be fair to do that. And I have a question about number 5, the initial consideration on the amendment.
Oh, wait, since that's a different item, can we finish the discussion on this first?
All
Do you
right.
mind? Okay.
Okay.
I promise we'll come back to that one.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on that?
I would agree with her that I don't think it's a bad idea to table it until the new.
First of all, it would give us
Council's
more
up there.
time. It'd give you guys more time. and then to get together with the new guys. Yeah. Sorry, Renee.
Does everybody, other thoughts on that? I mean, I guess that,
I was gonna say, what is Joe and
I'm fine with that approach. I mean, I don't, unless there's any reason why this has to, timing, it doesn't sound like there's this time sensitive right now. So they'll have the new members of the city council weigh in. I think I'm fine with that.
I think there's some merit to that in that the new people have to be, they have to oversee the implementation of it as a part of the council.
Right.
So.
The only thing I wondered is, as far as, you know, in January, you're going to be doing the budget. How will this affect the budget for what, you know, you said it didn't have a timeline, but if it affects the budget, it will.
Yeah, and some of these, as we go through the budget process, you know, with some of the ways we have the divisions outlined, there are positions that would be envisioned that have to go through the budgeting process that will have to be a budgetary discussion for council, whether or not it's something that council will support including in the budget. Everything that's listed on here right now really is intended to stay within existing budgetary resources, but as we move through and look at new positions, they would fall under some of these functions, so they'll have to be discussed as part of the budget.
Yeah, okay, so if it's not going to affect the budget, I don't see why you wouldn't, you know, why you couldn't delay it then.
Well, I just don't think that we should have to, you and Dave and I shouldn't be telling those guys what to do.
I haven't seen Randy squirming too bad. Or Renee. I guess I didn't see Renee there.
Well, but you know, it is a good point. You know, that I think if they're part of the decision making on it, it's easier for them to explain it to people, and it's easier for them to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
because they're the ones that have to live with it.
You know, right. I mean, and it is a big change.
I guess
in structure.
Did you guys get the packet information? Have you seen the org charts or anything? I wonder if that's something you ought to, you know, send out to them so they can start looking at it.
If we could get that to them, that way, first week of January, we can have it back on.
And I think that'd be something, if we're gonna pass the buck, we ought to know what we're passing to.
It's not really passing the buck. It's trying to be, you know, fair to those that are coming in.
Right.
I just don't think it's fair to.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with doing that. The only thing I'd like to, on his behalf, part of Lon's review is getting this done.
That's right.
And this council and the new council need to defend that, and that he tried, at least, if we table it.
And Lon.
Okay, we'll give him that.
Well, it's only fair.
Well,
you know.
if we're making that decision, we're not going to hold it against
That's
them.
right.
Maybe.
And then the early separation, that timeline would match up then with, you know, notification if they're going to take that, then that will help with that as well. Okay.
But I also have a question. Looking at this organizational chart, it calls for a deputy city manager, but it doesn't call for an assistant to the city manager. So is that going to be a combination, or is Amanda just kind of out there hanging by the flagpole, or what?
The organizational chart, even though it has the position on there, whenever we do a hiring, whether it's internal or external, we do have to post for it, and we have to go through the hiring process. And even though, I mean, if you look at this organizational chart, there are departments in there, but each individual position that's currently on the books is not listed. So if you were to go look, for example, you look over under engineering. We don't list engineering, 2 assistant city engineers, the engineer techs, everything else. They're all there. They exist only until the point at which a person vacates that position. So the job description still exists. Those positions still exist. If the position becomes vacant, then we make a judgment on whether or not that's a position that we want to backfill or not, and how it fits in with the organizational needs at that point. But this is not intended to list individuals. This lists functions and not every position underneath that function.
Okay, I have another question. If you, in fact, get approved to have a deputy city manager, then how about you listing your own job description? Because it's going to change drastically, I would say, looking at what the deputy city manager is going to be doing. What are you going to be?
Well, is it going to change drastically, or is it going to be more in line of what it's supposed to be? Because he's doing more, I think, than he was.
Well, the whole thing is, though, given what the job description is of the deputy city manager,
What's going to take off his plate?
and
type
what,
of thing.
yeah, what is, so I think that really needs to be done.
I'm sure that that's part of what Lon is contemplating there would be, because it does change. I mean, this whole new structure does change his role overall. And so it's probably, I'm sure, I'll let him speak for himself. But
Yeah, that's something that HR will do as they continue to evaluate it, is as positions come online, for example, you have to take a look at what happens to other positions that might be out there. Are they still, does the description have to change? Does the split of functions have to be done differently? I'll use an example down here when we're looking at talking about a director of administrative services. When you bring a director of administrative services in and you have a budget manager and a finance manager and a payroll manager and an accounting associate, the DAS will take a look at the skills that they have, the things that those positions should be doing, and may bring recommendations back to the council for adjustments to the job descriptions based on the tasks they want those people to actually do. But we bring job descriptions to you based on what our best judgment is of those functions those positions need to do. But that person coming in still has the flexibility to make those actual work assignments. And when you look in particular at city managers and deputy city managers, there often is a lot of overlap, because the deputy city manager is, for all intents and purposes, my version of the deputy chief that is going to be filling in when I'm not here and going to have the capacity to do a lot of those same functions. My direction from the council earlier this year was that the council really wanted me to be able to move more into a leadership role, particularly with some of the bigger projects that the city has been working on that have not advanced forward at the rate that they really should, because you don't have somebody from the city out there being the champion for it or being the advocate for it. There's also other pieces that a city our size really should be doing that we just haven't, and that includes, like with what Doug Newman was talking about tonight, we're not pursuing any type of a structured or organized legislative agenda. Cedar Rapids has a lobbyist, their airport has a lobbyist, and they're very deliberate about what they do. Marion's at the size that we should be doing those types of things. Now that we have the CIP, we really need to be going down through and combing the CIP and working with our legislative delegations and outside funding sources to try to leverage every outside dollar that we can to go into those projects. Those are the types of things that the council wanted me to do. They're also already in my current job description. So if it needs to be adjusted, I don't think there's any issues with doing that. I look at it, though, as that it's just placing an emphasis on some of the different things that are already outlined in my job description, but that the description itself may not necessarily have to alter that much.
Okay, now can we go back to the...
Well, yeah, is everyone finished with this item? Okay. So I think there's probably a consensus that we hold off on actually voting on approving this until early next year. Okay.
Well, I mean, if Renee hasn't even seen what it is about, this is coming in totally blind, and that's not fair to her, so.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now back to number 5.
Okay, number 5. There was Mickey Shields had an article in the magazine that we get.
Cityscape?
And it was about how this stuff had to be, that it could, any raises for city council could not take place during an election year in November and December. Now, what is this, the amendment going to affect that, or is this still good?
I think what he was getting at there, and I'll verify it, is that the actual raise could not take place during that period of time. But I think you're free to actually pass the ordinance or amend the ordinance to allow for it with a later effective date. And for all intents and purposes, this one doesn't really affect anything because the circumstances we're trying to prevent where a council pay rate could go backwards did not occur, and we'd already selected the amount that the council was going to be eligible for. This really impacts the next round, which would be about this time next year.
So then in January, y'all get a raise?
$. Yeah, the ordinance already provided for that.
Okay.
We're seeking to head off the potential that with the way it was initially
$8.
drafted, they could go backwards.
Get a drink.
And I don't get any cut on this, so, you know.
All right.
I thought we were out throwing in $1 for you. No,
Oh, okay. I also, I have a quick, we have not had a public hearing as far as the sale of the library is concerned. I mean, I don't even know what the status of the library is at this point.
Yeah, there's no sale agreement or anything on the library at this point either. They had received a request for a response to their request for proposals for the redevelopment of that site, and they've been working through the specifics of that with the development company. We had a meeting today with a business that would be interested in going into that site, but there's still a lot of pieces that have to come forward before that project can move. I would anticipate that the first quarter of 2018, we are going to start to see some action on that project. The first thing that the council would likely see would be a pre-application that would go into EDA for some potential grant assistance on a parking ramp that would be on the block in between the City Hall and the current library.
But with a bridge across to...
It calls for a skywalk. Right now, the plans call for a skywalk across 6th Ave.
Yeah, this sounds too much like Cedar Rapids. I'm sorry. It's disturbing. Also, Ryan, I got a phone call about the road to the not the recycling, but the stuff that you get.
Yard waste?
Yard stuff, yeah. And that road is on a hill, and when you're coming back from the other place, all of a sudden you're meeting cars that are coming right at you. Is there some way to paint lane lines on it?
Yeah, we've talked about it. It's a narrow roadway. In this time of year, just to give you an idea, we had about 1,000 cars come in one day. So it's very busy this time of year.
Yeah.
For the most part, we don't get issues like that, but the last 2 weekends have been incredibly busy just because of the nature of the fall we had.
But it like a lane line with an arrow pointing in, a lane line with an arrow pointing out.
Good, yeah. We'll look at something, but usually we have someone down there directing traffic as well.
Ah.
Yeah. So people get impatient sometimes.
And I have one other question. The dog kennel, how is it coming with the junkyard next to it?
We have 30 violations noted between fire and building, and planning has 1 violation on there. He was supposed to be done here at the end of November, and he did not meet that deadline. And I've got the list all put together, all 30 violations put together. I just got to get over to the attorney's office probably this week yet, and I'm just going to go right to court now. I'm washing my hands of it and letting the attorneys.
So action is being taken.
It'll be taken, yeah. Get the list of 30 violations to the county or to the attorney.
Because I got the impression from the lady with the kennel that if something wasn't done, she was going to be looking for another location, and it might not be in Marion.
Yeah,
so.
and the biggest thing with that is I keep telling the lady and other people down there, it is an industrial area. What he is doing is absolutely legal. He just needs to clean it up a little bit. But he could still do the same business he's doing if he cleans it up. It doesn't make the business go away, because that is allowed, and even harsher businesses are allowed. But it's still about how you maintain your site. And his site is his problem is a maintenance issue. It's not a use issue. So he can still have wrecked cars out there. He can still do a lot of things out there.
Henry and Bert put up a fence, so you didn't see it.
Well, and that's how he can fix some of his problems.
Exactly.
Well, that's how they could do it, but I don't know if they want to do that. But it doesn't make it does not, it hides the problem. I mean, we can fix a lot of the problems, but it's going to hide a lot of the other things that they're ugly, but they're legal. So they're not all going to go away. They're just going to be hidden behind fences and walls and be stacked nicer than instead of a heap of material, it'll be a stack of material. It's still there. And I think
Yeah.
that's the problem.
I'm ugly, but I'm legal too, so.
Yes, sir.
I have one item, Your Honor, and I've been concerned about the Maidright building. And the thought has occurred to me, I know more about it than I probably should. And I think that's probably true with nearly everybody in the room. And I wish somebody would tell me, I don't want somebody coming saying you've been served. That's happened before. We need to know exactly what we can tell folks that are asking about that. And the other side of it is that I would like to request the building department approve the residential part of that building, and that our fire chief in the engineering report found great fault with it. I think if we were to have a fire in that building, we would lose everything to the alley. As good as our fire department is, it would be hard to stop in that age of a building. But in the meantime, Lon, I would be interested in knowing, what do we tell people? I mean, we're all getting a number of questions. What's the proper answer? I don't know.
Now, at this point, I mean, the council knows that we had hired a company to come in. We had a structural analysis done on the building once we saw what the condition of the facade was, and they had outlined a plan for us for what could be done to stabilize it. We've had the membrane put up there to do a couple of things. One is to to prevent water infiltration into the building, but also to make sure any loose brick or anything like that can't come out. The structural engineer did not feel that there was an imminent danger of a structural collapse or anything like that, provided that it was not allowed to deteriorate further. So that's what we've tried to arrest. At this point, I can't get into the specifics of what we know about the ownership of the building, but I can tell you that all correspondence, any maintenance requests or anything like that now is going directly to Community Savings Bank. So we have a contact with their loan officer up there who had been involved with the project, but they have now assumed a direct role in any property maintenance, any repairs, anything like that. So that's who we're dealing with.
In the building, there's a for sale sign still, or there was, at least?
For sale sign, I think, is gone, but.
Oh, it's gone?
I think it's,
Yeah.
I think it's just, there's a reason, I think.
The thing that, when I looked at it, it would be dangerous for a fireman, even Randy, could fall through one of the holes that are in that floor in there, and that's a big hole. The building is not a safe building under any circumstances, and I worry about the people living up there, and I don't want to be liable. I don't want the city to be liable if something were to happen.
Yeah, we have put together a list between the departments of what needs to be done to that building in order to make sure that it's safe and habitable. That's been provided to the bank. They've had people in and evaluated it, not only from a construction standpoint, but from the State Historical Society, and they've told us that they intend to make sure that those repairs are done.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, apparently they moved the clock back an hour instead of up an hour, so now it's 2 hours off instead of 1.
Do we have a clock in the budget?
Let's get one that runs on AA batteries and not some fancy.
I thought it came out of strategic planning that we wanted to make sure we kept the council's math skills sharp.
Yeah.
Heading into budget.
Okay, thank you, everyone.